Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. My name is Zishan Zaidi, and in my capacity as chair of Harvard Political Union, I'll be your moderator tonight. As some of us are aware, as of 1969, Harvard students participating in the Rotc program do so at MIT, and Harvard pays MIT certain funds for their participation in the program. Last spring, the faculty committee headed by Sidney Verba voted to discontinue this funding if the ban on gays in the military was not lifted. This was prior to President Clinton's election. This was prior to the don't ask, don't tell policy of gays in the military of this administration. And earlier this academic year, Neil Rudenstein stated that he would put off a decision on this issue until the end of this academic year. So we have assembled this panel today to talk about the question of should Harvard support Rotc. Our panelists for tonight, from my right, your left, to your right, are Dennis Lin, co-chair of the BGLSA, Jeff Redding, head of the Gay Rights Project of the Civil Liberties Union of Harvard, Karen Boyle, president of the Harvard Radcliffe Republican Club, and Curtis Pierce, a cadet sergeant major, U.S. Army, Rotc. Before we start the speeches, let me go over the format with the audience. We'll have 3 to 5 minute speeches from each member of the panel, followed by a short period of debate within the panel, in which members will be allowed to question other members or respond to points. Then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions and or brief statements, and then we'll call it a night. So without further ado, we're going to start the speeches now with Dennis Lin. Mr. Lin.
Okay, is this working? Okay, great. The first thing I would like to do tonight is to thank the Harvard Political Union and Zishan in particular, who live in my house, for inviting me to attend this forum. And I would also like to thank the other panelists for being here with me tonight. As a preface, I believe that it is important for me to emphasize right now, at the beginning of our discussion, that even though I'm here as a co-chair of the Harvard Radcliffe Bisexual, Gay, and Lesbian Students Association, whatever I should say later tonight or be interpreted as saying does not necessarily represent any monolithic opinion of the Harvard bi, gay, and lesbian community at large. Indeed, when I was first asked to be on this panel more than 3 weeks ago, I had my reservations. And this is because, as a senior who has listened to more than 3 years of endless polemicism regarding the Rotc issue, Rotc being the affectionate shorthand for the Reserve Officers Training Corps, I still find it to be a tragic dilemma. A dilemma because there is no perfect solution. Tragic because it could have been so unnecessary. To the consternation of the most of us, however, it is a tragic dilemma which can no longer be deferred. Over the years, Rotc has become a highly charged political issue, which even the Harvard administration is now finding very hot to handle. But I would like to remind all of us, myself included, that Rotc is also a very human issue, one which involves real careers, real people, and real lives. This is why I now would like to briefly tell the story of George. George is our all-American boy, handsome, hardworking, sociable, and even a student at Harvard. And like some of his fellow classmates, George would like to begin a military career by becoming a part of Rotc. Given his stellar credentials as the valedictorian of his high school, class president, and the captain of the football team, George is definitely qualified, if not overqualified, to be in Rotc. But our George has one problem, at least a problem in the eyes of the United States military. George is, shall we say, different. He is gay. Since the United States military does not admit gay or lesbian people who are open with their sexual orientation, in order to join Rotc, George would have to hide his homosexuality, believing that he should be true to others, and most importantly, to himself. George then has no choice but to be who he is, and consequently be rejected by Rotc. Unfortunately, George is but one of the thousands of gay and lesbian youths in our country who are denied of a possible career for being who they are. Under the name of discipline and order, the United States military has consistently discriminated against gay and lesbian people over the past 50 years. Even after the summer's ordeal, President Bill Clinton's don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue policy still does not differ tremendously from policies of the past. When I first immigrated to the United States from Taiwan at the age of 11, I believed that such discriminations do not exist in this country. However, after having spent my adolescent years behind the orange curtain, living in Representative Dennemeyer's district and next to the Richard Nixon birthplace and library, I now know otherwise. Disillusioned as I may be today, I still believe and expect Harvard to be different. It is a university which has been largely supportive of its bi, gay, and lesbian community. It is a university which clearly includes sexual orientation in its non-discrimination policy. And it is a university which has courageously severed ties with the finals clubs at the risk of offending powerful alumni on the basis that the clubs discriminate against women by not allowing their membership. I'm therefore saddened that the administration has wavered for so long on severing its ties with another exclusive club, and that is Rotc. I understand that certain students might not be able to afford a Harvard education if deprived of a Rotc scholarship. In such cases, then, I believe that the university should help these students by providing them with the necessary financial aid and not by supporting a discriminatory program. I understand that Rotc could be a great opportunity for heterosexual students who would like to pursue a career in the military. But I would like to ask these fellow classmates, could you honestly participate without guilt in a program which discriminates against a large segment of the American population for being who they are? I hope not. And finally, I understand that non-action might seem to be the easiest solution while dealing with the Rotc issue, for even within BGLSA itself, the responses are mixed. However, in a situation which involves discrimination, non-action then becomes cowardly. The time is now for Harvard to say no to discrimination and stop paying MIT the $128,000 annual facilities fee in support of Rotc. The time is now for all the Harvard-Radcliffe students to say no to discrimination by showing our support for ending all ties with Rotc. Writing letters to the administration, signing petitions, or simply talking to skeptical friends are just a few possible ways to make a difference. Not if I could turn the page. And the time is now for those courageous cadets of Rotc to say no to discrimination and perform the ultimate act of courage by questioning and challenging the institutionalized bigotry which now exists in the United States military. Indeed, 20 years from now, we might all look back at Rotc issue and possibly even laugh together about the debate that we're having tonight. But as of now, Rotc is of no laughing matter. People like George desperately need our help, and they cannot fight discrimination by themselves. I therefore urge the university to end its ties with Rotc until the United States military is willing to reconsider and change its policy regarding gay and lesbian people who are willing to die for their country. Thank you very much.
We're now going to move on to Curtis Pierce.
Good evening. My name is Curtis Pierce. I'm a senior here at Harvard, class of 1994. I live in North House. I'm a mechanical engineering concentrator. I'm also an Army ROTC at MIT. My rank is Cadet Sergeant Major. That makes me the highest ranking cadet NCO at the Paul Revere Battalion at MIT. My job as a cadet is to work hand in hand with our cadet battalion commander, who is also a student here at Harvard, in setting the policy for the training, conduct, and appearance of our battalion of cadets, which includes 63 students from Harvard, MIT, Tufts, and Wellesley. I came here tonight speaking principally as a student at Harvard who is participating in Army ROTC. Just as Mr. Lin pointed out, the comments that I make, I'd like to say right now for the record, are my own personal comments. I do not come here as representative of the United States Army, and nothing that I say should be taken in light as a representative of the United States Army. I think that we have to look at three important aspects in dealing with the ROTC issue here at Harvard. One basic aspect is the benefits for ROTC at Harvard. A key point is the training, the leadership skills, and the experience that it gives to students here. I think Mr. Lin obviously understands where I'm coming from, as he pointed out some of the things that George would be interested in doing as a student, as a cadet in Army ROTC. For instance, I have participated in airborne training at Fort Benning. Over the past summer, I was at Fort Bragg for a period of 9 weeks, and 3 of those weeks I served as in the role of a second lieutenant with the 82nd Airborne Division. When I graduate from Harvard, I plan to make the Army my career for a period of 4 to 6 years. The benefits that can give an individual are certainly great, and I think that Harvard should work very strongly to continue allowing students to take part in that type of program. The second key aspect that we have to keep in mind is the financial aspects that Harvard ROTC gives to its students. I come from a regular middle-class family. We live in Atlanta, Georgia. When I applied to Harvard's application is based on a need-blind admissions basis. Giving tours here at Harvard and also sitting on the Undergraduate Admissions Council, I've gone through this countless times, so I know exactly what need-based means. That means that when I apply to Harvard, they don't look at my finances, they don't look at if I have other scholarships or things like that, and they admit me on the basis of what I have done in the past. And then they'll look at overall what my family needs. And the scholarship offer that they made to my family, in my personal case, was $800. That was the grant that was offered to me. And the tuition here at Harvard is $24,000. Now, there is no possible way that my family could pay that, and without Army ROTC scholarship, I would not be here today. Now, my second choice as a school was the United States Military Academy at West Point. The point I'm trying to make is that there are a lot of students here at Harvard who are in that same predicament. If Army ROTC or Naval ROTC or Air Force ROTC could not be an option for students here at Harvard, there's no possible way that we could continue to come here. And I believe that Harvard would lose some of the greatest students here on campus. They would lose some of the diversity that they use as such a buzzword in the admissions, in all the admissions settings that you would go to. A third point is cost registration. As a mechanical engineer, I am a student in Harvard's small engineering department. Next semester, for instance, I plan to take a course at MIT in aeronautical engineering. That course is not offered here at Harvard. And it is typical Harvard policy that if a course is not offered here, and it is offered at MIT, that the student has the right to cross-enroll in that course. My point is that at one point, ROTC was offered here at Harvard. Now it is not offered. The only other place that it is offered in the general area is at MIT. As a student, I should be allowed to cross-enroll there with no extra cost to me. That should be part of my learning, part of my experience here at Harvard. Now, the main question that we're asking tonight is, why should Harvard support Army ROTC? And the question I ask is, why shouldn't it support Army ROTC? In the past years, the basis for not supporting Army ROTC has been discrimination against homosexuals, which blatantly said in the past that homosexuals cannot be in the United States military. And the new policy is don't ask, don't tell. And a lot of people claim that there really is no difference. There is a great difference between don't ask, don't tell and homosexuals not in the military. When you go, I know as a cadet, I've taken several military physicals. And one of the questions that they ask you is, are you homosexual? And they ask you that flat out during the physical examination. That's no longer a question. Don't ask, don't tell. If you don't ask me, if you don't tell me, I won't ask. It's very simple. There are a lot of things in the military that are not condoned, and a lot of things in the military that you're not allowed to do that you may be able to do openly in the civilian world. One of those things, for instance, is fraternization. In the military, there happens to be a class system, non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers. When I graduate, I will be commissioned as a second lieutenant. Part of my duty is to lead my troops. And my troops in general are the non-commissioned officers and the enlisted soldiers under my control. As an officer, it is my duty to lead them, not to hang out with them. If it should come up that I am going out with them on a regular basis, drinking in bars, hanging out at their houses on a regular basis, that is something that I cannot do as an officer. That's something that, when you think about it in the civilian world, many people will go, well, gee, that's really messed up. But that is what is necessary in the United States military, because it is very much about discipline. And it's hard for people not in that setting to understand what we mean by discipline. When you go to a military base, or based on things that you've seen on television, you see soldiers standing at attention. You always hear about keeping your boots shined, doing this, doing that, getting yelled at for certain things. It's not that they try to break you down and make you a certain type of mold. It's that the things that you do in the military are things that are going to save lives. You're talking about defending a country. It is very important that when you do something, you work as a unit, you work as a team, and that everybody has a role, and it's very crucial that everyone understands that role. In that type of setting, there really is no place for distractions of any type, be it racism, be it an emotional attachment to someone of the opposite sex, be it an emotional attachment to somebody of the same sex. There really is no tolerance for that in that type of setting. So the don't ask, don't tell policy really is sort of indicative of a lot of things that go on in the military, not something that is just for homosexuals, and it's not a standard that is set just for homosexuals. And I feel that it's important that a lot of people outside the military setting try and understand where they're coming from with the don't ask, don't tell policy, and that they understand that that really is a step forward rather than sort of keeping the status quo the same way it is now. And on that basis, I think that Army ROTC, Naval ROTC, Air Force ROTC should be able to continue here at Harvard.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reddy.
This summer, the RAND Corporation, a well-respected think tank based in Santa Monica, California, dealt the latest blow to the irrational ban on gays in the military. It, like the Navy's 1957 Crittenden Report and other similar reports, blew holes in the military's justifications for forbidding gays, lesbians, and bisexuals from proudly serving their country. Now, you may ask, why am I bringing up the broader issue of gays in the military, while the subject of debate tonight is specifically, what should Harvard's relationship with Rotc be? The reason is because the only way to rationalize Harvard's financial relationship with MIT's Rotc program is to say that the military ban is justified. There have been other arguments advanced for the continuance of this relationship. One argument is that students in Rotc will not be able to attend Harvard unless they receive Rotc scholarship money. Another is that Harvard cannot have any influence on military policy, and that the only thing Harvard would be accomplishing by cutting ties with Rotc is preventing some students from attending Harvard. As I will discuss, not only do these arguments have no validity, but the real issue is that Harvard, by maintaining ties with Rotc, is violating its own non-discrimination policy. The Harvard non-discrimination policy forbids discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. By giving money to Rotc, Harvard is using general fund money to fund discrimination against its own students. The only way that you can argue that Harvard can maintain its relationship with Rotc is to argue that an individual's sexual orientation affects their military service. For their non-discrimination policy does have an exclusion which allows for discrimination, if important, for, quote, job performance or course of study requirements, unquote. However, Rand report aside, this argument is foolish. If it is acceptable to be gay and in the military, but just not out, which is the current policy agreed to by the Pentagon, then obviously an individual's sexual orientation in itself has no bearing on their job performance. In a way, there really is no issue to debate here tonight. Harvard's non-discriminatory policy forbids discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. That is both the letter and the spirit of the policy. Those who wish to maintain Harvard's relationship with Rotc need to change or eliminate Harvard's non-discriminatory policy, a proposal which I doubt they'll find much support for. However, a concern that some people have with abrogating Harvard's relationship with Rotc is that students may not be able to attend Harvard without such scholarship money. This is the dilemma that most people have that I have talked to. However, this is an issue with the Financial Aid Office. The issue of adequate financial aid is a concern that most people have. I myself have haggled with the Financial Aid Office and almost could not attend Harvard due to financial constraints. Those who are in favor of Harvard's relationship with Rotc should not exploit this common concern about financial resources and make it appear that this is an important issue only to Rotc cadets. Furthermore, if Harvard ends its relationship with Rotc, those students already in Rotc would be allowed to continue and receive Rotc scholarship money until graduation. It's only incoming students who would not be able to participate in Rotc through Harvard. Also, if Harvard students were able to participate in Rotc without Harvard being involved, as Harvard is now trying to negotiate with MIT and the government to do, Harvard should not and would not be able to refuse Rotc scholarship money. It is not Harvard's business to decide where students' scholarship money comes from. But Harvard should also not be paying money to a discriminatory organization such as Rotc. Rotc prohibits gay students from receiving the same benefits that their straight counterparts have available. That is the real issue. Furthermore, Harvard does have the ability, as in all issues, to be a leader for the nation's universities. Dartmouth has been struggling with this issue, as well as Princeton, Carnegie Mellon, and MIT. To deny that Harvard has the ability to lead is ridiculous, if not sacrilegious, as is to deny that the military will not take notice when Harvard and other leading universities finally just say no. As Karen Boyle herself wrote in the November 1993 issue of Lighthouse, quote, "Hard work, honesty, cooperation, and inclusion evoke change," unquote. Harvard, through hard work, honesty in its adherence to its own policies, and cooperation between the administration, faculty, and students, can evoke change to a military policy which forbids inclusion of openly gay, lesbian, and bisexual students. If Harvard does end its relationship with Rotc, the military will lose talented people. But if Harvard continues its current relationship with Rotc, it will be giving implicit approval and explicit support to an organization that already kicks talented people out every day. 80 to 100,000, in fact, since the military began to kick out gays and lesbians in 1943. While I will not and cannot label those who support Harvard's current relationship with Rotc as homophobic, their belief does smack of ignorance. Ignorance to what this university does and should stand for.
Thank you very much. Ms. Boyle.
My name is Karen Boyle. I'm a senior biology concentrator here at Harvard, and I live in Elliott House. I believe the compromise of don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue is a real advance for civil rights, marking several critical steps forward. For the first time, one of the country's most conservative institutions has explicitly conceded that gay men and lesbians have a right to serve their country. Not only will the military stifle its bigotry, but there will be enforcement of laws against sexual misconduct for gays and straights, quote, without regard to whether the conduct alleged is homosexual or heterosexual. It is possible to support homosexuals in the military, desire and encourage further action to be taken for the rights of gay and lesbian soldiers, and support keeping Rotc at Harvard. I believe that Harvard should continue to accept Rotc scholarships. I reject the student-faculty recommendations and suggest that Harvard continue to pay the $130,000 annually to MIT for cross-registration and service fees. The breakdown of a service fee is roughly $1,300 per cadet. This is an expense many students on Rotc for financial assistance could not afford to pay on their own. In addition, it is blatantly discrimination by the university to mandate $1,300 service fee from cadets cross-registered at MIT, while any other Harvard student can cross-register and have the use of MIT facilities at no additional expense. The abrogation of Rotc scholarships would undermine Harvard's commitment to non-financially based educational opportunity. It is clear that the program provides needed financial assistance to a large majority of students enrolled. Simply put, some cadets would not have been able to afford Harvard without the Rotc program. As Captain M.E. Field explains, quote, Rotc, as a form of non-need-based aid, extends help to that vast segment of the middle class which can neither qualify for need-based aid nor find other ways to finance a Harvard education. The financial relationship between Harvard and the Department of Defense extends beyond the Rotc program and the students that benefit directly from Rotc scholarships. In addition to the $1.1 million Harvard receives from the DoD through Rotc scholarships, the DoD also awards approximately, right now it's $9 million annually in research grants to Harvard. The military policy concerning homosexual rights is mandated by the DoD. Rotc does not maintain its policy independent of the DoD policy, but rather as a result of it. Consequently, and as much as Harvard non-discrimination policy might conflict with the military's policy, it also conflicts with the DoD policy. Given this, any consideration of a financial impact of severing ties with Rotc should also include the loss of the other DoD money, or Harvard would be allowing a grave hypocrisy to persist. A move away from the DoD would seriously hurt the entire Harvard community. As a UC report on Rotc states, Rotc is more than a question of money, more than just a financial aid program. It is an opportunity for students to combine the academic rigors of a Harvard education with the complementary physical and mental challenges of the military. Discontinuing Rotc scholarships would eliminate military representation and detract from campus diversity, sacrificing many of tomorrow's Harvard student leaders, losing prospective students to institutions with Rotc. A Rotc education is unique in that it combines the fullest benefits of both a liberal arts education, complete with the widest spectrum of political and social attitudes, with the opportunity to develop leadership, maturity, responsibility, and technical skills. What substitute can there be for a day which includes morning exercise and drill, several hours of classes, meals where conversation ranges from sports to the role of protest as a form of free expression, and a forum on the ethics of combat? Without some form of Rotc program, Harvard would impair its ability to provide the fullest education possible. Abolishing Rotc makes a statement that sacrifices the futures of 100 or more of our fellow students. It is unclear whether any positive changes could result from severing ties with Rotc. It would free Harvard of conflicting connections, but do little to address the real problem at hand. In my opinion, if Harvard honestly wishes to change military policy or attitude, how can that be better done than to send her own Harvard daughters and sons into the Corps of Officers, which will be shaping those policies for the next half a century and beyond? Any positive changes to result from severing ties is additionally unclear, because land-grant colleges are required to offer Rotc, and because the military is downsizing the Rotc program, our leverage in direct dealings of the Department of Defense is negligible. What is clear, though, is who would be hurt. First, the students in Rotc, and then the broader community at Harvard as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Boyle. Now we'll be moving on to the next portion of our debate, which is questions and response within the panel before we open it up to the audience. And we're going to start in reverse order. So, Ms. Boyle, you're free to ask a question or make a comment about what the other panelists said. Just one thing, this is addressed to all panelists. Please keep your questions and comments as brief as possible. Thank you.
I have no questions. I do have some comments, and they're sort of just a reiteration of what I just said. First, in addressing Mr. Lin's comment on, he made a statement referring to that don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue is quite different, is not quite different than past policy. I disagree with that. I find that it is quite different than past policy, as I stated in my opening comments. It is a striking move on civil rights, and like I said before, one of the country's most conservative institutions has conceded that gay men and lesbians have a right to serve their country. Not only will the military stifle its bigotry, but there'll be enforcement of laws against sexual misconduct for gays and straights. I think it's important to note that that this is a critical step forward, and that we should recognize that in light of this discussion. The second thing that I have to say is in response to Mr. Redding's comment regarding non-discrimination policy at Harvard and the current policy with the Department of Defense. I think that it comes down to sort of a balance and judgment. Harvard has a loyalty to the right of individuals to freedom from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. But Harvard, I think, would be doing itself a larger disservice to itself, its students, and the community at large by severing its ties with Rotc than it's currently doing. I think this might be different if we could prove that, the final balance would be different if we could believe that Harvard changing its stance on Rotc would simply change the Department of Defense policy. But it's unclear whether any positive changes result from such a move and whether anyone would be helped. And like I pointed out, there is very clear evidence to who would be hurt, the Rotc cadets and Harvard as a whole. The next statement that I have is in reference to both Mr. Lin and Mr. Redding's comments regarding financial aid. And I think this is something really important to remember. Both these individuals, Mr. Lin and Mr. Redding, made statement that there would be financial assistance available at Harvard for those cadets that would not be receiving financial assistance from the Rotc program. But in my quote from Captain M.E. Field, he most directly stated that, that Rotc is a non-need-based aid. And many of the people that you're talking about, many of the students here, come from middle-class families that when they apply to financial aid at an institution like Harvard are ignored. And I think...
That's not what I said. I said Harvard should provide the financial aid.
But we're not living in an ideal, we can't think about ideal circumstances. We have to deal with what exists.
Tell me about it.
No, I understand, but ideal circumstances of financial assistance, you can't simply say that, it'd be great if these students could receive financial assistance because that's not going to happen at all. That's
That
all I
should
have
happen.
comment.
Ms. Redding, questions, comments?
My first comment is that the military policy is not a step forward. Before this summer, openly gay lesbians, bisexuals, and gays could not serve in the military. They still cannot. If they admit their homosexuality, then the burden of proof is on them to prove that they are celibate and will remain celibate for the rest of their lives. Now, who in this room can say that that's going to happen to anyone? That anyone can prove that anyone's going to abide to that? Second of all, but that's not really the real issue here tonight. The real issue is that Harvard has a non-discrimination policy which forbids discrimination based on sexual orientation. Harvard, by paying out of its general fund $130,000 a year to a discriminatory organization which discriminates against its own students, is violating its own non-discrimination policy. In order for Harvard to retain its relationship with Rotc, it's going to have to change the non-discrimination policy. I really don't think that argument is going to hold or that you want that to happen. As a woman, Curtis as black, me as gay, Dennis as gay.
An Asian.
Second of all, a real concern is that, that you've brought up, is that the Department of Defense grants $9 million in research grants to the university. The Department of Defense, this is mentioned in the ROTC, the official ROTC committee report released last year. The Department of Defense did not say to researchers, are you gay? If you're openly gay, then you cannot receive this research money. The Department of Defense does not discriminate in allocating research grants on the basis of sexual orientation or any other such factor. Thus, to argue that we would, to be consistent, that the Department of Defense would have to cut off those research grants is wrong. Second of all, Harvard does have the, like I said in my speech, Harvard does have the ability to lead this nation's universities. Universities across this nation, including the ones I listed, other ones, University of Pennsylvania, and countless others are dealing with this issue. Harvard is a leading national university, if not the leading national university. It can evoke change. Furthermore, the Army gets 70% of its students through Rotc programs. To say that the Army is not going to look at its Rotc programs being threatened and take those threats seriously is, again, I believe, wrong. That's about all I have in response to those arguments. Oh, one last thing is that according to the Rotc committee report released last year, quote, "The estimated financial impact on Harvard of a discontinuance of Rotc scholarships is in a range from $150,000 to $315,000. Harvard is paying Rotc right now $130,000 a year. That money could be put into the financial pool and cover a great amount of that discrepancy."
Mr. Pierce, any questions, comments?
I have several comments to make. The first, many of these are directed towards Jeff in the comments that he just brought up. The first is that one of Harvard's admissions goals is to get the brightest students in the country. Jeff, I'm sure they spend far more than $133,000 per year to do that. And if they discontinue ROTC, this year at Harvard we have at least 100 students here. Okay, they would basically shoot themselves in the foot and push away those 100 students who would come to Harvard to participate in Army ROTC. That would basically be shooting themselves in the foot over $133,000.
How many gay students have they turned away from Harvard because gay students couldn't participate in Rotc?
I don't think you can say that's the same thing, because countrywide, across the nation, prior to the new policy, gay students cannot participate in any Army ROTC program or in any ROTC program. It wasn't just a Harvard ROTC program. But if you stop ROTC at Harvard, those are students who may want to participate in ROTC who cannot then come to Harvard. It's an entirely different scenario.
So let's discriminate in the name of capitalist competition.
I'm sorry.
So let's discriminate in the names of capitalistic competition.
I don't think that's the same thing.
I think it is. I think that's
In
the
what way?
situation you're describing right there.
In what way?
In the way saying that if we don't take these students,
Other people will. If you go to the admissions office
So
and
we-
ask them about the fight and the struggle that they go to get the top students, they will tell you that it is a fight and a struggle. And to push away students who would come to Harvard and participate in Army ROTC or any other ROTCs just because they don't want to participate in, just because the program is not here, is quite different than telling students, I'm sorry, let me get my train of thought back. That is quite different. That's quite a different scenario than telling someone who is gay or someone who is lesbian that they can't come to Harvard because they can't participate in Army ROTC.
but see, what you're saying right there, isn't it? I mean, to paraphrase, that wouldn't that just be discrimination? It's okay as long as there is this capitalistic competition involved. and we
No,
want
I'm
to
not saying
get
that.
the
What I'm
best
saying
and the
is that
brightest.
what I'm saying is that Harvard's policy. I'm sorry. What I'm saying is that by Harvard not allowing ROTC on this campus, it would keep students out of Harvard who would want to participate in both Harvard and ROTC. Okay.
Curtis, what your argument comes down
policy,
to is that you're supporting discrimination. You have
No,
not
that is
addressed
not
the
what I'm
non-discrimination
saying.
policy at all.
I'm addressing your point that you made about the $133,000.
You're not addressing the non-discrimination policy at all. All you're
Okay,
talking about is
Jeff.
financial concerns, which has been proven that by allocating the $130,000 into the financial aid pool, most of the discrepancy between what Harvard would provide and what Rotc provides can be made up. Harvard has a non-discrimination policy. What you're advocating is that Harvard not adhere to its non-discrimination policy.
Respond if you.
My point on the non-discrimination policy is that this is a definite step forward, the policy that the don't ask, don't tell policy. You said,
But it's still in
wait a
violation of
second,
Harvard's
let me finish,
non-discrimination policy.
Jeff, okay? You said, all right, if we look at, should Harvard continue to accept general funds from the Department of Defense? You said that yes, they should, because the Department of Defense did not ask researchers and so forth, are you gay? The military now is not asking, are you gay? What is the difference there?
The Department of Defense is not banning research grants from being allocated to openly gay, lesbian researchers. It's not discriminating on that basis for research grants.
Okay, what do you consider open and
It is
gay?
blatantly discriminating against gay and lesbian students who want to participate in Rotc and in the military.
What would you consider an open and gay person in the military doing? What would their role be as quote-unquote open and gay?
A person
What would their
who,
rights
when
be?
talking about relationships, does not have to hide the gender of the person they're talking about. A person,
I believe that when you made your comments, you said something about they have to sign a policy that they are going to be celibate. Is
no,
that
I
correct?
said that under the current don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue policy, a student or anybody in the military will be kicked out of the military if they say, I'm gay, unless they meet unless they meet a burden of proof requirement, which says that in order for them not to be kicked out, they have to prove that they are celibate and they will remain celibate for the rest of their life.
All right, Jeff, last week in our Army ROTC class, we had officers from the JAG Corps come in. That's the Judge Advocate General's Corps, who are the attorneys for the United States Army. And I sat down and I asked them, how does the Army feel about what is the Army's response to the new policy, don't ask, don't tell? And what he told me is that, okay, let's go back and let's look through the books and let's see what the actual policy is. And the book they gave me was this book right here, Manual on Court Martials. And this contains all the possible things that you could be tried for in a court martial in the United States military. The only thing that is in here that could possibly be against homosexuals is sodomy. If you are caught in the act of sodomy, then yes, you can be discharged. Other things that are in here, however, are if you are caught in the act of sexual assault, you can be discharged.
But isn't
If you're
that
caught-
straight and
Yes,
homosexuals?
straight
as well?
sexual assault. If you are caught, you can be discharged.
The
Sodomy,
US
straight and
Congress-
homosexual, you can be caught. If you're caught, you can be discharged. Fraternization, if you're caught, you can be discharged. Indecent acts, if you are caught, you can be discharged. In the Army, there's a regular policy of strictly separating male and female barracks. Over the past, as I stated, I spent 9 weeks at Fort Bragg. There was a very strict policy. After a certain hour, males could not be in female barracks. If you were caught in those barracks, basically your career would be over. You would definitely have to explain why you were in those barracks. It's not just
Curtis,
it's
it
not
seems
just
to me
policy
that you're
against
saying
homosexuals.
that the debate over the don't ask, don't tell, the whole military ban, the whole debate was a farce, that it was debating over the court-martial book. I think that that's seriously misinformed, and that if you had noticed yesterday, the U.S. Congress finally approved its Defense Department budget for the military and explicitly codified the ban on gays and lesbians in the military. And it wasn't even a don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue policy. It was a don't ask, don't tell policy, which can be rescinded in the future, which made no mention of equal enforcement of court-martial rules, which President Clinton had asked for. Senator Sam Nunn defeated that, and the policy passed by the U.S. Congress was much stricter than President Clinton's.
Right. See, let me read this little excerpt here from the Associated Press release just today in the Crimson, saying, exactly stating that Clinton set forth a policy of don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue on July 19 that says sexual orientation is not a bar to service, but open homosexuals will be forced out of the service. Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Sam Nunn, a leading opponent of ending the ban, wrote his own policy that was adopted by the House and Senate. The Nunn policy says don't ask about sexual orientation, but allows a future defense secretary to reinstate the question. It says don't tell because homosexuality is an unacceptable risk to morale, good order, and discipline. The Nunn policy also makes no mention of don't pursue to stop the witch hunts to foray out gays. The White House and Nunn have said the senator's policy is fully consistent with the president's plan. Clinton's policy is a directive to the armed services, but Nunn's policy, once the president signs the legislation, will be law.
But I think the real issue here is that the ROTC is violating Harvard's non-discrimination policy, and I haven't seen anybody address that issue. You're advocating that Harvard not adhere to its own policy.
All right.
Can I just make a statement to bring this
Yes.
sort of back to Rotc for a second? I just want to make a comment and sort of stress something that was said earlier about the $9 million that is given from the Department of Defense and research grants, and you made comment that that's not discriminatory, that's not based upon and focusing on homosexuals. The thing is that the military policy concerning homosexuals is mandated by the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense is the one to make that statement, correct? Do you agree with
Excuse
that?
me.
The
Yeah.
Department of Defense is the one to make the policy concerning homosexuals?
Actually, the policy only applies
Rotc
specifically to
follows-
Army,
Rotc-
Navy, Marines.
Rotc follows the policy set forth by the Department of Defense.
The policy specifically applies to the armed services.
And that comes from the Department of Defense. That is a
Therefore-
Department of Defense decision.
Therefore,
Therefore,
But
the
only
Department-
applying to the
Wait,
armed
wait.
forces.
but therefore, because it's from the Department of Defense and it's okay.
No, I'm not saying it's okay. What I'm saying in reference to the $9 million that the Department of Defense gives to Harvard, that it would be hypocritical for Harvard to accept those $9 million and reject the $1 million geared just towards Rotc.
But Harvard did not say, but the Department of Defense did not say that these kind of research cannot be done by openly gay or lesbian researchers. That's the difference.
The official University Rotc Committee report says, quote, other instances in
please
which
keep this
Harvard
brief
receives
if you're
Department of
gonna quote it,
Defense
yeah.
funds. Harvard receives funds under a series of Department of Defense grants and contracts. These are distinguishable from Rotc because receipt of funds does not involve or require the exclusion of any individual from participation in activities because of his or her sexual orientation.
Well, I mean,
I still don't see any mention. I still don't see any. I still don't see you dealing with the issue of Harvard violating its non-discrimination policy.
made
You
statement
can't get beyond that.
I think you can get beyond it to see what good would be done in kicking Rotc off his campus. That's what we're supposed to be arguing. And like, it's not just the discrimination policy; it's the effect that it's going to have on the.
I don't see any
We're
university
gonna let
policy.
We're going to let Mr. Lin
regarding.
make a couple of
Right.
very brief statements, then we'll open it up to the audience. Dennis, please brief.
Right, okay, so first of all, I would like to say, it's already doing a lot of harm by discriminating a significant minority group, and also a significant group of minorities. And also, I would like to address Curtis's remark for a while there, talking about homosexuality as, well, a lot of things were forbidden in the military anyway. But the thing is that, do they forbid people from being heterosexual? Do they forbid people from marrying somebody of the opposite sex or just talking about it? Okay, that's one remark. And another one is, I really do believe that Harvard should come up with some plan to pay students who really cannot afford to come to Harvard. And even if it's not ideal, I know that, gay bashing, whatever in this world, this is not an ideal world, but we try to solve that, and that's why I'm here today, to solve those kind of problems. And finally, I also do agree that ROTC does add to the diversity on campus by providing this kind of military education, but at the same time, because of their discriminatory policy, they're excluding a certain segment of Harvard students to be able to benefit from this kind of education. And therefore, if Harvard supports this kind of program here, it's basically saying it's okay for a certain group of students to benefit from this diversity and not another group of students. And that is just unfair and unacceptable.
Okay, at this point, we're going to open it up to the audience. We have 2 microphones. Before you make your question or statement, please introduce yourself with your name and any group affiliation that would be pertinent. Furthermore, we prefer that you ask questions and that you keep those questions brief. If you wish to make a statement, please keep it within 20 seconds or so, and we're going to try to enforce this strictly. Starting with you, sir.
Hi, my name is Rob Yale, and I'm the director of the Civil Liberties Union of Harvard. And my question to Mr. Pierce is, does your experience on the Undergraduate Admissions Council lead you to believe that Harvard admissions are so precise and so exact that the 1,500 accepted are the only 1,500 best people to be in the school every year? Don't you think it's likely that if maybe out of the 25 that are from each class from Rotc can't come, unfortunately, some of them can't afford it, other people equally deserving are available? That's my question to you.
My thought is that, obviously, the quick answer to your question is no. Admissions is not that strict. It is not that stringent. But the goal of the admissions board is to get the best students possible, the best high school students possible in the class. Now, if a large percentage, or even if some number on the scale of 25 students is interested in ROTC and can't come to ROTC, that is a significant portion, I feel, that the admissions board would be pushing away.
And you don't think there might be some other students who could fill in that gap just as well? And perhaps...
Well, if those students were chosen, if those 25 were chosen, then it was in the admissions board's idea that those students would be best suited for their experience here at Harvard. And if you push away those 25, then you're just saying to the admissions board, well, take the next 25 who may not be as good as that top 25 and bring them in instead. I think if you're looking for the top and the brightest, you should give them the opportunity to come here and not just push them away.
Thank you. Sir.
I'm Colin Sepp. I'm a graduate student in history and a tutor at Elliott House. I have a question for either Mr. Redding or Mr. Lin. As I understand it, you said that Harvard should withdraw its financial support of ROTC until the United States Armed Forces changes its policy toward homosexuals in the military. Yet all ROTC policies, as Ms. Boyle and Mr. Pierce have pointed out, are in fact DOD policies, which are in fact United States law, specifically United States Code 10. And as we know, all United States laws are established by U.S. Congress and signed by the President of the United States. I recall to you the debate in Congress on this issue. The armed forces presented their preferred opinion, as did a number of other agencies, but in the end, as Congressman Barney Frank said, the votes weren't there in Congress to establish new policy allowing openly homosexual persons to serve in the military. Would you then advocate that Harvard severed all ties with the United States government, since it is the United States government and the United States Congress and the President who have codified a discriminatory policy toward homosexuals?
One of you is going to answer that. It was either or. So, decide.
Okay.
Like I said, the policy, the law, there's lots of laws out there, but they're specific. And the Department of Defense policy specifically applies to the U.S. Armed Forces. It does not apply to granting research grants and so forth. So that's just really not a valid argument, or it's really, if anything, a scare tactic.
Sir.
Hi, my name is Dave Monero. I'm a graduate student here at the Kennedy School. I just want to point out, Mr. Lynn and Mr. Redding, your pursuit of non-discriminatory policy is a noble one. However, I must point out to you that you're targeting the wrong issue here by closing the ROTC, and I'll put it to you this way. You mentioned, Mr. Redding, you mentioned that ignorance is one of the main factors contributing to discrimination. I agree with that, and I don't believe that there are many who would disagree. But don't you find it ironic, Mr. Lynn and Mr. Redding, that you would cut out the most educated people from the organization that you say is discriminatory? It's essentially cutting off your nose to spite your face. By allowing these people into the military, by allowing the educated into the military, it's possible to effect change from within in the future. But by cutting off the ROTC, you will not allow these people to effect that change. Can you comment?
That involves a presumption that they actually disagree with the ban on gays in the military. From a reaction
Do you know
here
that they
tonight,
don't,
from
though?
reaction here tonight, I would believe that that's probably not the case. Second of all,
Have you ever asked, though?
second of all, the main issue here, undeniably, is that Harvard has a non-discrimination policy. Harvard would have to change that non-discrimination policy in order to bring Rotc back into the fold. There's just no other way to do it. And like I said earlier, that the military itself is already denying itself a huge source of diversity by banning gays and lesbians from the military. So why should Harvard continue to give implicit approval, like I said, or explicit support to an organization that already is kicking out?
That's not my point. Address my point.
I did.
Jeff, have you ever asked anyone if they are in support of the ban or not, or how they feel on homosexuals in the military?
I said that his comment involves a presumption that they disagree.
But my question is, have you ever asked anyone? You're
Yes,
presuming.
I have. And I've received both yes and no, but most.
So you're saying that there are people out there who could be in favor of
Yes.
withdrawing the ban, who are in Army or who are
Yes,
in
definitely.
ROTC.
Definitely.
So they could effective change in the future.
I believe that obviously people have been trying to affect change in the military, and they've been kicked out for trying to affect change.
The very-
But
by
do those
being
people
openly
are those
gay and
people
lesbian.
are those people just
The
homosexual,
issue,
Jeff?
but the issue here, like I said, is not whether Harvard has some grand scheme to affect change from within, to affect change from without. The issue here is that Harvard is violating its own non-discrimination policy. That is the letter and the law.
Sir.
Hi, my name is John DPR. I'm a member of the HPU here, and I have 2 points, actually, the first of which was brought up by the speaker before me. When he spoke about, it's the Department of Defense's rule about the don't ask, don't tell policy. And even though it's not specifically the ROTC, accepting money from the Department of Defense is, as you say, implicitly accepting their policy. If you are truly idealistic about this, you would say that the Department of Defense has this policy, and therefore will sever all ties with the Department of Defense, and as he said, to the logical extreme, the U.S. government as well. Seems very inconsistent just to select the ROTC. And it seems a valid argument last spring when Colin Powell was going to come here for commencement. There were people that wanted to get an injunction and say it was illegal for him to speak here because he was a part of the Department of Defense, which discriminates. So it was a valid argument then, and it is now.
That was one person's argument.
Okay.
So
can I go on to my
making
second
a point or asking a question? Okay, the thing is that, first of all, that's probably that one person who made that particular
There was a
action
lot of
towards-
people with stickers too.
But it's definitely not
protesting.
somebody from BJLC, not that I
And
know
not
of.
someone from the Civil Liberties Union.
And then another thing I would say is that once again, let me repeat myself, is that it is the ROTC. It is the armed services where they discriminate against. They don't let, again, let's people
But that's part of the
participate.
DOD.
So, but that's because we don't want to incriminate other people who are other parts of that's not a part of
Oh, so you'll
this
take their
thing.
money, but you won't actually support the ROTC.
But it's first of all, it's not taking.
Great deal, yeah.
But if they say, if the researchers, if they say that by openly out bisexual, gay, and lesbian researchers are not allowed to do research with that kind of money, then we would oppose that. But since they do not say that, therefore we're not going to oppose such a thing.
You're
It would be
actually
like
missing-
slapping our own face.
You're missing my
or-
point. My second point was to address Mr. Redding, as he many times pointed out, we're not addressing the discrimination policy. You say Harvard has an anti-discrimination policy, and therefore we cannot support Rotc, which discriminates. Just to let everyone here know, in Harvard's admissions policy, they admit openly that ethnicity is a factor. And to me, that sounds like discrimination. Harvard discriminates in their admission, so it's hypocritical to say that this discrimination policy is so important that nothing can go against it.
But see, we're
I
not
think it's more
Harvard. We
hypocritical
cannot-
for the
Wait,
university.
one at a time, please.
If anything, it's hypocritical for the university, if that is true, which
It is.
I don't see it. I have the policy
It's
somewhere,
general
but,
knowledge that ethnicity is a factor.
general knowledge.
Yes.
I have a specific policy to refer to.
Well,
And
call
the specific
call the
policy
admissions
refers
office.
to, the specific policy refers to non-discrimination and forbids it, not general knowledge.
Well, they do it.
specific.
They do it as well.
All right,
So
thank you,
that's
sir.
what I'm saying, basically. They do it.
But
so-
we have no control of the university. We're trying to influence it here, just like you.
Just because there's one hypocrisy doesn't mean that another hypocrisy is not
Just say you
bad
have
either.
to change it if you want to do this.
If you want
It's
to,
not rock solid. That's what I'm saying.
if there are inconsistencies, then those are inconsistencies that have to be addressed. The specific issue tonight here is Rotc. It's not about ethnic admissions and so forth.
All right, thank you, sir.
My name is John Stafford. Mr. Redding, can you give me the full text of Harvard's anti-discrimination policy, the different groups?
Wait,
Harvard
hold on.
does not-
We're not going to have more reading here.
I
Could
would
you
like
ask
to
something
know
that's a bit more
which
specific?
are the different groups. It's an important point. Sexual orientation,
Okay.
or
Just don't read the whole page.
just the various. Mr. Redding, is national origin something that Harvard does not discriminate against?
Yes.
Okay. Do you agree with the Rhodes Scholarship Program?
I'm not going to go into that issue. That issue,
It
like I
only
said,
allows
to the
students
speaker
of
over there, obviously this university has several hypocrisies. But just because there's one hypocrisy doesn't mean that we allow them all. That's just not a valid argument. The argument tonight here is specifically the Rotc issue. And I'm saying that the Rotc program violates Harvard's non-discrimination policy. That is the hypocrisy that we are addressing here tonight, and that is the hypocrisy that I am standing against.
Thank you. Sir.
My question's for Mr. Redding, Mr. Liu. I'm Eli Sorswag, I'm an undergraduate at the college. Sorry, I'm Eli Silverswag, and I'm an undergraduate at the college. Is that better? My question is, Harvard already has a policy of keeping its distance from Rotc by banning Rotc from campus. But it maintains a constrained relationship as a way of sending the message to DOD and Rotc that it is against its discriminatory policies. But by cutting itself off completely by Rotc, how can you think that that's going to make the government or Department of Defense change their policies and in other words, do you think that cutting off a relationship completely, that's going to convince them to change the relationship so that Harvard will suddenly reinstitute the policy? I would think that that maintaining some sort of constrained relationship where, you know, we're not going to, you know, you're not going to have the full advantage of a relationship with us until you meet certain guidelines would be more a way of affecting change because your cards are still on the table. You're still dealing with that organization. Second of all, that's my question. In other words, how do you think that you can influence people by totally cutting off their relationship with them? Why do you think that the Department of Defense needs Harvard to continue its operations? I mean, if they...
All right, the question's clear. Again, one.
Was it addressed to?
Either one.
All right.
Okay, your question is, could you just...
The question is, how do you think that getting rid of Rotc, how do you think that's going to influence the Department of Defense? They're going to say, well,
like I said earlier,
well, we really need you guys. You know, we think that if you get rid of that ban, we'll definitely, you guys will definitely take us back.
Okay. Like I said earlier, this is an issue across the nation in several universities, including the leading universities of the nation. Harvard has the capability to lead on this issue. It has the capability to coordinate on this issue. Harvard has national prominence, and people listen when it talks. 2, whether or not it sends a message or not, the issue here is that Harvard is paying out of its general fund $130,000 to a discriminatory agency to discriminate against its own students. If there's nothing more morally reprehensible than that, then I don't know what it is. And that's the real issue here. Second of all, when the university kicked Rotc off campus in 1969, that was sending a message about militarism, about the Vietnam War, and so forth. This is sending another message in another era.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's just important to reiterate the point that by keeping ties with Rotc, even the way they are now, that people on the Harvard campus that might disagree with the discrimination policy of the DoD could work with Rotc internally. The people that graduate from Harvard with Rotc could go on to change the policy, and I think that's sort of a summarization of some
Harvard
of the points
has retained a relationship for 4 years while debating this. Nothing's changed. It's only gotten worse.
Hi, David Gordon, undergraduate here. This is a question for Mr. Redding, which is similar to what the gentleman was saying before, that Harvard does have a need-blind admissions, but you can't say it has a color-blind or ethnic blind. I mean, just look at the panel. Just look at the panel. Don't look at manuscripts. Very diverse. They are obviously taken into consideration. If ROTC, if ROTC was a way that Harvard would enable to ensure that diversity and say free up money to pay for homosexual students and then allow them to come here. What are your comments toward that?
Like I said, one hypocrisy does not justify another hypocrisy. That's
you don't
the
think the
third
diversity
time.
here is important, though?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
We've addressed that.
Really?
Sir.
Hi, my name is Jeff Hauser, and I'm an officer of the Civil Liberties Union. I'd like to ask either Mr. Pierce or Mrs. Boyle whether they are aware of...
Boyle.
Miss Boyle, sorry.
I'm not married yet, thanks.
Whether either of them is aware of who Pete Williams is, and whether or not Pete Williams, well, to answer my question, was an open, and ask you to respond to how this has ramifications on the Defense Department question. Pete Williams was the openly gay press secretary for the Defense Department under Dick Cheney, and he was openly gay and had the highest security clearance you can achieve. And doesn't that sort of prove that the Defense Department doesn't apply its anti-gay policy to itself?
That still doesn't answer our question about Harvard accepting funds from the Department of Defense. That still doesn't change the fact that the Department of Defense is the umbrella organization for the military, and that policy for if they're what they're talking about, the policy that would discriminate against homosexuals is a Department of Defense policy. That still doesn't change that.
Well, our point is you deal with the specific organization, the military, within the Defense Department that does discriminate, and you don't ban relationships with a part of the organization that doesn't discriminate.
Well, the point is that Rotc hasn't made its own discrimination policy. It follows the policy of the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense gives $9 million to Harvard. Harvard wants to keep taking the $9 million because they can't afford not to, but it's easy for them to say, well, we don't want the $1 million because that would go against our discrimination policy because it's Rotc. It's very easy for them to do that. I think there's a real discrepancy there. It's very hypocritical of Harvard.
All right, sir.
I'd like to address the point that Mr. Redding and Mr. Lin made about Harvard's non-discrimination policy and how no one seemed to be addressing this. I think one of the points being made here is that ROTC, as it is, does not discriminate on the basis purely of sexual orientation. The rule, as many of us interpret it, as I interpret it, as many of my fellow cadets interpret it, is restrictive of speech and of behavior. And in the military, speech and behavior are restricted. That's the way the military works. And in that light, given that another part of Harvard's mission is to develop people to take their place as leaders in society, and given that the military profession is a legitimate, honorable, and necessary one, at least as honorable, legitimate, and necessary as any of the other professions Harvard teaches, that should be available to Harvard students.
Was that a question or a statement?
Available to all Harvard students.
So, yeah, I'll answer the first part, which is a question, not the second part, which is a statement. Saying that, exactly, you say it's a behavioral control. But the thing is, does the military control heterosexual behavior? Does it say you are not allowed
Yes.
to openly declare you're not allowed to declare that you are a heterosexual in the military?
Tailhook.
And you're not, and you're not allowed to talk about your wife in the military? I cannot imagine that.
I'd like to make a comment here, Mr. Lin.
Very brief.
Okay, there are a lot of things that really don't come up in conversations. If I'm at home beating my wife, who cares? If it is found out that I am at home beating my wife, I can be punished for that.
You should be.
But I don't talk about it. Okay, there are a lot of things that you do that you don't necessarily need to talk about.
Well,
in the military, when you're doing your job, you need to do your job. What you do outside of that is your own time, okay? If you don't talk about your relationship while you're doing your job, then it is nobody's business but your own. You make a conscious decision to bring up what you are doing in your home life. That is your own conscious decision.
My example that the military does not, about speech and so forth, that if you declare yourself gay, et cetera and so forth, that's just one example of the way that the military can prosecute you and kick you out for being gay. There are at least 4 or 5 other ways which are explicitly stated in the policy. And one is that if you're explicitly reading extensive, for example, one that I specifically know of and can remember is that if there's enough burden of proof against you and so forth, then they can initiate, without you saying anything, then they can initiate inquiry, et cetera, to determine if you're gay, and you wouldn't have to say a thing. And if they believe that you are, then you do have to prove.
What you just said is not comparable.
We're gonna.
On or off base.
We've got
For
3 more questions
heterosexuals
on the
also,
floor. We're gonna take them.
sexual misconduct.
Not off base.
Well, but basically, for homosexuals, sexual misconduct is just by being homosexual itself, basically.
All right. Ma'am.
My name is Hillary Anger, and I'm an undergrad senior, and I've been on the undergraduate council since just after the council voted to recommend that Rotc be reinstated. And I'd like to ask a question that picks up on some of the comments that Ms. Boyle and Mr. Pierce made earlier about the issue of cross-registration at MIT. And my question has to do with the original reason why Harvard stopped Rotc on campus. As I think about the relationship between Harvard and Rotc, which is, I think, the point of this forum, not necessarily Rotc itself, but the relationship between the school and Rotc, I think about what responsibility a private university has to bend over backwards, so to speak, to be involved with any independent scholarship program. And I'm reminded of an additional concern which hasn't really been addressed here about Harvard's relationship to Rotc, having to do with One original reason why Rotc was kicked off campus in the late 60s had to do with academic control. Harvard had no control over the professors who were hired for Rotc, and they were in fact voting members of the faculty, and that was a very strong concern of the university. And there was mention earlier of the similarity between cross-registration for Rotc and cross-registration for other subjects, that Harvard students can go to MIT and have that be reimbursed for other subjects, but not for Rotc. And I'd like to point out a big difference between those, which is that these other courses are academic courses and have nothing to do with military service. And I want the panelists, especially Ms. Boyle and Mr. Pierce, to comment about what the Rotc program's insistence on violating the curriculum and academic standards other departments have to follow, how that has to do with Harvard paying money for basically supporting a program which undermines its control over its own faculty and quality control, and why we should have to spend money on a non-academic subject in order, as a condition for receiving scholarships on behalf of students.
Thanks.
I'll make comment regarding the issue of cross-registration. First, I sort of take offense anyway to you saying that it's not academic military intelligence classes, because I see military intelligence classes in the classes that cadets attend at MIT as academic. So I don't see there's a discrepancy between military classes and academic classes that I might cross-register at MIT for. I think it's discriminatory of Harvard to mandate that the cadets pay $1,300 to cross-register to MIT. That is my opinion. I think that Harvard should continue to pay the $130,000, and I find that it is discriminatory and hypocritical. That they will cause the cadets to pay the money to cross-register and take classes at MIT.
I'm sorry, Joe, am I misunderstanding you? So you're saying that you would support Harvard continuing to have MIT offer these classes, but you're not saying anything about whether you would support Harvard bringing Rotc back to its own campus and offering those classes itself?
I'm making comment to your first statement regarding just the cross-registration. I think it'd be great if we could have our own program here at Harvard. That's not under discussion. What I'm talking about is specifically the funding that Harvard is questioning to give to MIT for the service fees, that I think they should continue to give the money of $130,000 to MIT for the cross-registration and facility services, and I don't think the cadets should have to pay that out of their own pocket to take classes there. No other student has to. Why should cadets have to?
Mr. Pierce, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I'd like to make comments on the academic nature of ROTC. I think that ignorance is a key word to answer this question. Few people on this Harvard campus know what we do in ROTC class. They ask me every day, because I wear my BDUs, my battle dress uniforms, which is the camouflage. I come back from dinner and they ask me, did you do training? Did you run drills? And I ask them, what are drills? What are training? What is maneuvers? And they don't know. Okay, we are not just out on the field every day running around going bang, bang. It's in many cases, it is a very academic situation. We are learning, we have had courses on psychology, courses on leadership, land navigation. This is just from the Army ROTC perspective. I can't speak for the Naval as well as Air Force ROTC, but it is a very academic nature, and that's why we spend most of our times in classes and very little time in the field. So on the academics point, I think that it is academic, and it is something that Harvard does not offer here that we can get at MIT. And so I feel that based solely on academic nature, can you take this class at Harvard? No. Therefore, we should be allowed to cross-enroll at MIT.
Thank you.
Without paying extra for it.
Can I make an additional point, very quick point,
Very quick.
on originally getting Harvard off the campus? And Hillary brought up the fact that the committee felt in 1969 that they couldn't control ROTC academic standards. We don't really know exactly what the case scenario was in 1969. It may have been just that cadre at that time. We don't know if it was ROTC in general or not.
I think we do know. I think that we know that the reason was that they could not choose the professors themselves. However, these professors were voting members of the faculty, and Harvard, as a private university, does have the right to choose its own members of its own faculty. I think that we do have that.
Okay, if I cross-enroll at MIT, Harvard does not choose the MIT faculty. What if Harvard decides that they don't agree with MIT faculty? Then don't they have the right to just cut all cross-enrollment with MIT?
That's a rhetorical question. Thank you very much.
Okay, my name is Coma Gandy. I'm a Class of 95 government concentrator in Mather House. My question is addressed to Mr. Letting and Mr. Lin. It's been reiterated over the course of this evening that one hypocrisy does not justify another. Am I correct? then if the Department of Defense endorses a discriminatory policy towards homosexuals, why is it all right to sever $132,000, which would be going to people who wanted to join the military, but it's not all right to sever $9 million, which would be benefiting gays and lesbians? Is it because the gays and lesbians are benefiting from an institution which endorses a discriminatory policy, or in another case they are not?
Again, we've dealt with this issue extensively this evening. There are several differences between the two situations. One, the Department of Defense, again, does not restrict research grants from openly gay, lesbian,
But the
bisexual
Department of
professionals.
Defense endorses discriminatory policy. How do you justify that hypocrisy?
I need to finish this. Okay. Second of all, Harvard, like I said, that Harvard, if Harvard students found a way to be in ROTC and receive ROTC scholarship money without Harvard being involved, then that's business where they get their money from. Researchers apply for grants also. The same principle could apply there. It's none of Harvard's business where individual researchers get their money from. And third difference is that Harvard is paying money to a discriminatory organization, not receiving money from it, which is the difference with the researchers.
Sir. My name is Jordan Schreiber. I'm a junior at the college. Mr. Pierce, your position is somewhat unclear to me, since on the one hand, you call the don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue policy an improvement over the old exclusion, and on the other hand, you seem to equate homosexuality with wife beating. So my question to you is, do you believe that homosexuality is incompatible with military service?
My answer to you is no, I do not.
Okay, then talking about changing from within, do you intend to work to change the policy to end the exclusion of open gays and lesbians?
I'm sorry?
Referring to the question about changing the military from within, as a member of Rotc, do you intend to work to change the policy to prevent exclusion of open gays and lesbians from military service, since you don't believe that it's incompatible with military service?
What I say now, sitting right here in my chair, would be quite different than what I actually do years from now. I mean, I'm not going to say yes or no to that question.
Do you hope that you'll work toward changing it, and so that the policy is more in line with what you believe?
I personally, as I already answered your question, yes, I do believe that homosexuals in the military is personally fine with me, as long as it does not affect performance or affect peers' performance or the unit's performance. Then I believe it is fine. When it becomes an effect on how the unit operates, then that creates a problem. Going back to your point about wife beating, that was a bad parallelism on my part. Okay, I was just trying to pick an example of an instance in which, if you don't say anything about it, no one will know anything.
Okay, thank you very much for the audience, to the audience for coming, and to the panelists for coming. Thank you.